The text came that night. My daughter-in-law, Mom, don't worry. The bills are covered. 1 hour later, I stood under the glass of the Aurora rooftop, watching them toast with champagne charged to my account. I locked the card right there. Her smile died. I thought I was the only one she was fooling. But when I traced the payments, I realized she wasn't just charging me. She was charging the whole neighborhood. My name is Beatrice Langford. I am 62 years old, a widow, and I live in Riverton, Oregon. This town, nestled in the damp green of the Pacific Northwest, is where I have built a quiet life. I work part-time, keeping the books for the Harbor and Torch Foundation, a small non-profit dedicated to coastal preservation. The numbers are clean. They add up. They make sense. My world is one of balanced ledgers and the predictable rhythm of the tides, a stark contrast to the chaos that was about to unfold. The text message arrived at 6:15, just as I was debating whether to wear the blue cashmere sweater Noah had given me 2 Christmases ago. It was from Sienna, my daughter-in-law. Mum, no need to come. Bills are covered. 5 words, no punctuation, just a blunt statement. We were supposed to have our weekly dinner. Noah had called earlier, sounding strained, saying they had to postpone, that money was tight this month. Sienna's text, I assumed, was a follow-up, meant to reassure me that whatever financial hiccup they were having, they had managed it. It was typical of her efficiency, but it landed like a slammed door. I put the sweater back in the drawer. The house felt suddenly, profoundly empty. I grabbed my coat. The air outside, even cold and damp, was better than the silence inside. I walked without purpose, just letting the pavement pass beneath my feet. Riverton is small, but the downtown core has seen a surge of new money. Old brick facades now housed oyster bars and boutique hotels. I turned onto Morrison Street, heading toward the river, when a burst of laughter cut through the evening hum. It came from the Aurora rooftop. It was the newest, brightest, most expensive restaurant in town. A glass box perched atop the old mercantile building, designed entirely to be seen. I glanced up, intending to walk on, but I stopped. Through the wide, spotless panels of glass on the ground floor lounge, I saw him. My son, Noah. He was seated at a long table, surrounded by at least a dozen people. And at the head of the table, bathed in the warm glow of artisanal lighting, was Sienna. This was not a postponed dinner. This was a celebration. I moved closer, staying in the shadows of the street. The scene was framed like a moving picture. I saw the deep metallic gleam of a champagne bucket, condensation beading on its side. I saw plates crowded with food, dark, thick-cut steaks, towers of seafood. Just then, a waiter approached their table carrying a dessert, a tiny, brilliant firework, a sugar sparkler shooting sparks into the air. The table erupted in applause. Sienna raised her glass, her diamonds catching the light. Bills are covered. The words hit me again, this time with physical force. I was the bill, the obligation they had covered by cancelling. The dinner I was meant to host, the simple pot roast I had planned, was replaced by this spectacle. I felt a cold wave of humiliation, the sharp, specific pain of being deliberately excluded. My hand went to my pocket, my fingers closing around my phone. It was the accountant in me, the part that needs proof, the part that distrusts assurances without a balance sheet. I opened my banking app. I had given Sienna a supplementary card on my primary account, for emergencies. I had said. For groceries. For a sudden car repair. The screen refreshed. A new pending charge. Aurora rooftop. The amount made my vision swim. It was thousands of dollars. More than my monthly salary from the foundation. A single meal. The decision was not a decision. It was a reflex. My thumb moved across the screen, tapping through the menus. Card management. Freeze card. The digital toggle slid from green to grey. I looked up, back through the glass. The party continued. The waiter returned to the table. He leaned in, speaking quietly to Sienna. Her bright, social smile faltered. She waved him away, annoyed. He didn't move. He spoke again, his posture deferential but firm. Sienna's annoyance flared into irritation. She reached into her expensive clutch, pulled out the sleek black card, my card, and snapped it into his hand. The waiter left and returned almost immediately. He shook his head gently. Sienna's face tightened. She spoke sharply. The waiter apologized. The friends at the table were beginning to notice, their laughter dying. Sienna's eyes darted around the room, angry, searching for a solution. And then they scanned the street outside. Her gaze locked onto mine. I stood perfectly still on the sidewalk, the phone still glowing in my hand. I watched her face register my presence. I saw the flicker of realization. I saw the flash of anger. But there was no shame. There was no apology in her eyes. No embarrassment at being caught in a grotesque lie. What I saw, clear as day through the expensive, polished glass, was contempt. She looked at me as if I were the dirt on her shoe. I held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then, I turned my back to the window, to the party, to my son, and I walked away. The cold air hit my face, but I didn't feel it. The silence in my head was gone, replaced by the cold, sharp click of a lock falling into place. The walk back to my 2-story home felt longer than usual. The Riverton air, usually just damp, felt heavy, clinging to my coat. The image of the sparkler on the dessert, of Noah laughing, of Sienna's eyes meeting mine through the glass, played on a loop. My house, usually a sanctuary, felt like a museum of my own gullibility. It has been 6 years since my husband, David, passed. 6 years since the world tilted and then shrank. My life contracted, drawing its borders tightly around this house, the trellis of white clematis David planted by the porch, and, more than anything, Noah. He was the only significant piece of David I had left. Everything I did, every decision, every sacrifice, was to ensure his stability, his happiness. I had poured all the love and worry that once filled a larger life into this one. Single focus. The first time Noah brought Sienna home, I was hopeful. She was dazzling, not just beautiful, but vibrating with a polished, urban energy that seemed exotic in our quiet town. She worked in freelance marketing, she said, a term that sounded impressive and vague. She spoke in a rapid, confident cadence about brands, trends, and personal optics that I did not quite understand. But Noah looked at her with pure adoration. I wanted to love what he loved. I tried. The memory of that first dinner soured in my mouth, tasting like the bile rising from the shock of the restaurant. The signs were there. I see them now, sharp and clear, like rocks visible only at low tide. She had pushed my signature lasagna around her plate. "I'm trying to cut back on heavy carbs," she had announced, not unkindly, but with an air of superiority. as if my cooking was quaintly poisoning. Later, I was telling a story about David, about the time he and a young Noah tried to build a sailboat in the garage. It was a favorite, a story Noah usually loved. I looked over, and Sienna was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving in quick, dismissive swipes. A small, tight smile on her face as she read a text. She had not heard a word. She had even laughed at the framed photo on the mantel Noah at age 7, missing his 2 front teeth, covered in mud from the creek. "Oh, my God. We have to fix your public image." She had teased him. But the joke felt sharp, aimed at the past, at my past with him. I dismissed it all as generational friction. I was the old-fashioned mother-in-law. She was the modern woman. Then came the wedding. It had to be the dream. Not Noah's dream, which I suspect would have been a backyard barbecue, but Sienna's. It required a historic venue, couture flowers, and a caterer flown in from Portland. The numbers were astronomical. It's an investment in their happiness. Beatrice, I told myself as I signed the checks, transferring funds from the accounts David and I had so carefully built. I was buying my son's future joy. The investment did not stop at the altar. A few months later, they wanted to move. Sienna had found the perfect place, a new luxury build, a riverside condo. They could not quite secure the lease with her freelance income. It was just a small hurdle. "Mum, if you could just co-sign," Noah asked, his voice hesitant. It ended with my name on the lease. Not co-signed. My name. I became the sole leaseholder. "It's just a formality. Mum," Noah assured me. "We'll pay you the rent and you pay the leasing office. It builds our credit." So, I was renting an apartment for them, which they were renting from me. A convoluted arrangement that Sienna explained as financially savvy. My key was on the porch. I fumbled with the lock. The house was cold. The credit card. That was the masterstroke. I gave it to Sienna just after they moved. "For emergencies only," I stressed, holding the crisp plastic. "A burst pipe, a medical bill. You know." Sienna had smiled. That brilliant, blinding smile. "Of course, Beatrice. You're so generous. We'll barely even know it's there." But it was not just there. It became the foundation. It started small. A charge for groceries that was slightly too high. A utility payment when I knew their utilities were included in the lease I paid. It soon became an invisible third salary in their household. It became the wallet they dipped into when theirs was empty. And eventually, it just became theirs. The charge at the Aurora, that was not an emergency. That was a statement of ownership. My son. Where was my son in all this? The calls tapered off. My weekly dinners with Noah became monthly check-ins with them. When I did call, Sienna often answered his phone. "Oh, he's just swamped. Beatrice, I'll have him call you back." He rarely did. My visits had to be coordinated, scheduled, put on Sienna's calendar. I, who had raised him, now needed an appointment to see my own son. I stood in my dark foyer, the image of Sienna's contemptuous stare at the restaurant burning behind my eyes. For the past year, I had been fighting a different battle, a battle with myself. Was I being oversensitive, a clinging, jealous mother? Was I the stereotype I swore I would never become? Was I confusing generosity with control? And was this just the normal, painful process of letting a child go? Or was I being manipulated, the cold, hard number from the Aurora rooftop answered that. The contempt in her eyes was the confirmation. This was not sensitivity. This was theft. I was not a mother. I was a resource. I took off my coat, dropping it on the chair. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, clarifying anger. I was an accountant. I lived by the numbers. And for the first time, I was going to run the numbers on my own life. Sleep was not an option. The cold fury that had settled in my chest on the walk home was now a focused, white-hot beam. I went straight to my study, bypassing the cold kitchen. I sat at David's old mahogany desk, the one where I still kept the books for the foundation, the one where I had helped Noah with his calculus homework. This was my territory. I am an accountant. The numbers do not lie, and I was finally ready to listen to what they had to say. I logged into the bank. I did not bother with the dashboard summary, the sanitized pie charts designed to make you feel in control. I went straight to the raw data, downloading the full statements for the supplementary card. The last 6 months. I printed every page. I needed to see it in black and white, to hold the evidence in my hands. I spread the pages across the desk under the green glow of my banker's lamp. The first few transactions were the noise, the lifestyle creep I had foolishly tolerated. Charges from the gilded spa, week after week. Purchases at Aveline Boutique, where a simple blouse cost more than my monthly car payment. A recurring membership at the exclusive Porter's Athletic Club, a place I knew Noah, who preferred hiking, would never step foot in. There were airline tickets for 2 to an energy balancing retreat in Sedona. It was all shallow, wasteful, and deeply insulting. But I was looking for something else. My eyes scanned the merchant descriptions, the accountant in me searching for anomalies, not just extravagances. On the 3rd page, I found it. A recurring automatic payment, dated the 15th of every month. The merchant, Northwest Utility Services, LLC. The amount was small, comparatively just a few $100s each time. A utility company I pay the lease on their condo. The lease agreement explicitly includes all utilities. This charge was redundant. It was wrong. A small, cold stone dropped into my stomach. I highlighted the line with a yellow marker. I kept reading. The numbers grew. 2 months ago, a charge from a high-end travel agency. The memo line read, Belize Ocean Suite Package, 2 guests. Noah had never mentioned Belize. He had not told me he was leaving the country. Then, 3 weeks ago, the charge that made me stop breathing. A single transaction. Aurelia Jewels. The amount was $41,900. I stared at the number until the pixels blurred. $41,000 on jewelry. The image of Sienna at the Aurora, diamonds flashing on her hand as she raised her glass, burned in my mind. My hands were shaking. I saw other, stranger charges. Thousands of dollars spent at Monarch Design and Artisan Furnishings. These were suppliers for show homes, the kind of furniture used to stage empty houses for sale. I had been in their condo just before Christmas. It was sleek, minimalist, and sparsely furnished with items that looked nothing like this. They did not own this furniture. So where did it go? I reached the final page. My fury was calcifying into something hard and precise. I pulled David's old adding machine from the shelf, the heavy, beige one with the paper roll. He used to total the hardware store's receipts on it every night. I began to punch in the numbers, skipping the small grocery runs, focusing only on the luxury items, the travel, the services, the jewelry. The machine chugged. The clack, clack, clack of the keys, the only sound in the silent house. I hit the total button. The red ink printed the result. $312,000 in 6 months. My husband's legacy. The money I had saved. The buffer against the world. $312,000 drained away like bathwater. I pushed the statements away, my breath short. But the accountant in me wasn't done. The jewelry was simple greed. The utility company was something else. It felt like a system. Northwest Utility Services, LLC. I went back to my computer, my fingers flying. I have access to professional databases through the foundation, tools for vetting vendors and checking corporate registrations. I ran the name. The LLC was registered 6 months ago. The address listed was not a utility office. It was not even a commercial building. It was a virtual office service, a mail drop in a corporate park just off the I-5. I traced the merchant ID from the bank statement. It resolved to the same location. I started tracing the others. The Monarch design furniture. The consulting fees I had dismissed. Many of them. Not all, but many. Traced back to the same virtual office park. This was not just spending. This was structuring. She was splitting the charges, running them through shell companies she likely controlled, masking the scent. A real charge at a spa here, a fake one to a utility company there. It was a pattern split. Repeat. Conceal? She was hiding the scale of the theft, even from me, the person she was stealing from. The text message from Sienna echoed in my mind. Bills are covered. I looked at the highlighted line. Northwest Utility Services, a utility company. A sick, terrifying question bloomed in the pit of my stomach. She had said, bills, plural. But whose bills? Exactly. The paper statements were a map of the damage. But the corporate veil of Northwest Utility Services was the real mystery. I needed to see the architect. I moved from David's desk to the living room, picking up my tablet from the side table. I mostly used it to read gardening books. But months ago, Noah had borrowed it. He needed to check something on his iCloud account. He said, to help sync my calendar. I never used the calendar, and I had never logged him out. I opened the Messages app. It was dormant, a relic of his login. I tapped it, and the screen flickered, the device suddenly pulling data from a cloud I did not belong to. It chimed once, twice, and then a cascade of conversations, blue and grey, populated the screen. They were not my messages. They were his. They were hers. My heart was a cold, hard knot. I saw a group chat labelled The Skylarks. It was Sienna and 3 friends. I tapped it. I saw a flood of photos from the Aurora rooftop last night. Beneath them, a message from Sienna. Sent just after I had walked away, the old dragon locked the card. A reply from a Chloe. OMG, what now, dinner ruined? Sienna's response was ice. She will fold. They always do. She is just trying to feel relevant. It is fine. I scrolled up, my thumb moving mechanically, travelling back weeks. The conversation was a dizzying mix of boutique links, spa appointments, and casual cruelty. A message from one of them. Are you sure the utility thing is safe? See, Sienna's reply. Honey, just let her pay. That is the role of their generation. They sit on all the money. It is our job to redistribute it. Redistribute. I backed out, my hand trembling, and selected the thread between Sienna and Noah. I had to know. I saw a screenshot. It was the text I had sent Noah 3 days ago, looking forward to our dinner, Friday pot roast. Beneath it, Noah's text to Sienna. Mom wants to do dinner Friday. Sienna's reply, absolutely not. I have the tasting at Aurora. Tell her we are tight on money and have to postpone. She will buy it. She loves to swoop in. I saw my son's reply. Okay, we'll handle. I scrolled further, past dozens of handle it messages from her. Then, a fight from a month ago. Sienna. If you do not stand with me on this, Noah, I am gone. You choose, me or her. His response came 3 agonizing minutes later. You. It is always you. I just need time. She just does not understand the new economy. He was not trapped. He was a collaborator. I kept scrolling, digging deeper into the digital wound. I found what I was looking for. A voice note from Sienna to Noah, sent yesterday morning. I pressed play. Her voice, smooth and confidential, filled the silence of my house. Babe, I am just going to text your mom that the bills are covered. She likes feeling needed. She likes thinking she is solving a problem for us. It is the easiest way. Just back my play. We will see her next week or something. Click. I stopped the audio. Bills are covered. The lie that had felt like a dismissal was, in fact, a calculated tool of manipulation. I scrolled down further in the Skylarks chat. My eyes landed on an image Sienna had sent them 2 weeks ago, like a trophy. It was a screenshot of an invoice. The logo, cheap and generic, Northwest Utility Services, LLC. The Bill 2 line was just an account number, but it was the caption she typed beneath it that stopped my breath. Newest client onboarded. The older block is now fully covered. I froze. The older block. I live in the older block. It is not just a street name. It is the name of our homeowners association, the older HOA, the community I have lived in for 30 years, the community where, for 5 of those years, I served as the volunteer treasurer. I know the books. I know the residents. My blood ran cold. One of the Skylarks had replied, "What does that even mean?" Sienna sent another attachment, not an image, but a spreadsheet file. I tapped it. It opened in a new app. It was a simple ledger. Column A listed services, utility consolidation premium, monthly management fee, grid service charge. Column B listed flat fees. Column C listed addresses. I recognized every single one. 724 Willow Creek. That was Dorothy Pike. 71. 917 Birchwood. Mr. Henderson, 86, a widower. 735. The Gales. All residents of my block. All retired. All, I knew, living on fixed incomes. The pieces slammed together with the force of a physical blow. Northwest Utility Services was a phantom. Sienna was using my credit card, the emergency card, to pay the actual aggregate utility bills for these elderly residents. Then, she was billing those same residents, or perhaps the HOA itself, through her fake LLC, charging them again for the same services, plus her own invented management fees. She was fronting the operation with my money, then pocketing the profits from my neighbours. She was not just charging me. She was charging the whole neighbourhood. I could not stay in that house. The silence, which had once been my comfort, now felt complicit. The evidence I had uncovered, the spreadsheets, the cold, mocking iMessages, the calculated theft from my own neighbours was a physical weight. It was 10:15 in the evening. The anger had burned past the shock and settled into something solid and heavy, like steel. I knew they would still be there. A celebration bought with $47,000 of someone else's money does not end quietly. I did not change. I did not even grab my coat. I drove the 7 blocks back to the Aurora rooftop. I walked through the tall glass doors. The hostess, a young woman in a black dress, moved to stop me, but I did not slow down. I was no longer a shadow on the sidewalk. I was a creditor. The main dining lounge was still bright. I saw them. The long table of friends was gone. The party was over. The manager, a man in a tight suit, stood by the bar. Noah sat at the table, slumped, his head in his hands. Sienna was standing, facing the manager, her back to the room. Her posture was rigid, and though I could not hear her words, the fury in her shoulders was obvious. The card had been declined 3 hours ago. They were trapped. I walked directly to the table, my footsteps silent on the thick rug. The manager saw me first, and his expression, which had been strained, flooded with relief. He thought I was the cavalry, arriving to settle the bill. Noah looked up. His face was pale, his eyes wide and sick. "Mom, what? What are you doing here?" Sienna spun around. When she saw me, her face, already tight with anger at the manager, curdled into pure, venomous rage. "You," she spat. "Me," I said. My voice was impossibly calm. It did not shake. "Ma'am," the manager said, stepping forward. "There seems to be an issue with the card on file. The payment of $47,300 did not go through." Sienna let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "She knows. She's the one who locked it." "Mom," Noah said, standing up, his chair scraping loudly. "Please. This is just a huge misunderstanding. Let's go outside. We can talk about this." I ignored him. I looked only at Sienna. "I have a question for you," I said. "I'm not answering anything," she snapped. "What is Northwest Utility Services, LLC?" The blood drained from her face. It was the one question she never expected to hear. I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes before the anger slammed back down. "It's a household management service," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's complicated. You wouldn't understand." "A management service," I repeated, nodding slowly. "To consolidate the utility bills for Dorothy Pike, for Mr. Henderson, for the entire Alder block, charging them for services you paid for with my money." Noah looked confused, staring at Sienna. What is she talking about?" Sienna. "She is embarrassing us," Sienna hissed, grabbing Noah's arm. "She's lost her mind. She's making a scene because we cancelled one dinner." "Was it one dinner?" I asked. "Or was it the $312,000 you have stolen from me in the last 6 months?" Noah actually recoiled, staring at his wife. "Sienna, 300,000. She's lying." "The numbers don't lie," I said. "The bank statements don't lie. And the iMessages on your group chat, the Skylarks, they don't lie either." Sienna's face was white. I reached into my handbag. I pulled out the last remaining supplementary card, the one I kept in my own wallet. I placed it on the polished wood of the table. "This," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence, "is the last time you will ever use my money." I turned to the manager. "The charges on that account are fraudulent. I have already filed a dispute. You will not be paid by me." I looked at my son. He looked broken. "Mom, wait. I am going home. Noah," I said. I turned and walked away. I did not run. I walked, my head held high, past the hostess, who stared, open-mouthed. I pushed through the glass doors and into the cold night air. The air was clean. I was breathing again. As I reached the sidewalk, I heard her voice from inside, a low, furious growl, directed at Noah but meant for me. She won't dare do anything. It was the last challenge, the final miscalculation. She had no idea. The accountant was just getting started. I slept in my clothes. The confrontation at the Aurora had drained the adrenaline, leaving behind the heavy, sticky residue of grief. The image of Noah's pale, sick face. The sound of Sienna's final, muttered challenge. She won't dare. She was wrong. I had dared. And now, in the cold light of morning, I felt the crushing weight of what I had done. I had, perhaps, just lost my son. Around 10, a soft knock came. I opened the door to Dorothy Pike, my neighbour from down the street. She was 71, sharp-eyed, and held a large Tupperware. "I made too much minestrone," she said, walking past me into my kitchen. It was a lie. Dorothy never made too much of anything. "I also heard, through the grapevine, that you caused quite a scene at that ridiculous rooftop place last night." I sat heavily at my own kitchen table. "Dorothy, I think I have made a terrible mistake." "Nonsense," she said, ladling soup into a bowl. "The only mistake is letting them get away with it." She stopped, her eyes meeting mine with a sudden, fierce understanding. "He was my son-in-law. My daughter passed, and he was all I had left of her. He asked me to co-sign a loan to consolidate his business. A year later, I was in foreclosure. I lost the house I lived in for 30 years. They count on our love, Beatrice. They weaponize it." My breath hitched. She was not just here with soup. She was here with a mirror. "You need a shark," Dorothy said, "but one that swims in our waters." She slid a business card across the table. "Camille Rios. She specializes in family law and civil fraud. She got me half my money back. More importantly, she got him put on a registry. She is decisive." Camille Rios was not a shark. She was a scalpel. Her office was precise, organized, and devoid of clutter. She was a woman of about 40, with a focused energy that was the exact opposite of Sienna's chaotic glamour. I did not cry. I did not rage. I was an accountant. I presented the data, the printouts of the 6 months of statements, the corporate registration for Northwest Utility Services, the screenshots of the iMessages. She reviewed everything in silence, her only sound the occasional click of her pen. "Good," she said finally, closing the folder. "You have done 90% of the work. You have the paper trail. Now, we build the legal structure around it." She turned to her computer. "First, let's review your assets. The house. Paid in full," I said. "The condo they live in. The lease is in my name only." A thin smile touched her lips. "Excellent. That is our primary point of leverage. They are not co-owners. They are tenants. And they are about to be in breach." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "We have 2 goals. First, defense. We lock down your assets. Second, offense. We recover the stolen funds and expose the fraud against the HOA." That afternoon, we built the fortress. Camille drafted a new last will and testament and a new living trust. "You will have a life estate, Beatrice," she explained, "meaning you remain in this house, untouchable, until you die. We will change the beneficiaries. Your son will receive a structured, non-liquid trust, the majority of your estate. However, I want it to go to women like Dorothy, I said, my voice firm, and women like me. Done. We will name a new fund supporting elderly women victims of financial fraud. Next, she called my bank's fraud department. We put alerts on every account. Now, she said, we set the trap. You will call Sienna. You will apologize for the public scene, and you will offer her a new card, a no-limit peace offering. After what she did, it is a bait card, Camille clarified. With a hard spending limit of $5,000, it is tied to a real-time tracking app on my phone. She will not be able to resist. She will try to drain it immediately. And when she does, she will provide us with the final, real-time proof of her intent. The last step was the alliance. She did not just steal from you, Beatrice. She stole from your neighbours. I called Mr. Alder, the president of our HOA, and the Gales, the retired couple who lived on the corner. I invited them to my home, with Camille present. I laid out the Northwest Utility Services spreadsheet. Mr. Alder's face turned a deep red. We have been chasing those utility consolidation fees for months. We thought our provider had made a billing error. She was. She was double billing us, stealing from the HOA reserve fund. The Gales were horrified. We are on a fixed income. Beatrice, that extra fee? We had to cut back on our prescriptions last month. They all agreed to be present as witnesses. By the end of the day, Camille had a thick binder, merchant IDs, HOA statements, a map linking Sienna's LLC to the addresses of the victims. I felt a surge of cold, righteous anger. When do we call the police? We will, Camille said, placing a calm hand on the binder. But not yet. The criminal case can be slow. The civil case is our hammer. We are not here to launch an emotional grenade. We are going to let them walk right into a quiet, well-lit, perfectly documented net. The phone call was the hardest part. I had to swallow my disgust, to manufacture a voice that was hesitant, apologetic, and weak. I dialed. Sienna picked up on the fourth ring. What? She said. Not a question. A demand. Sienna, I began, letting my voice tremble just a little. I am so sorry. I overreacted at the restaurant. I was emotional. I was wrong to embarrass you and Noah like that. It was uncalled for. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear her breathing, calculating. You were way out of line, Beatrice, she finally said, her voice cold. I know. I know I was. I want to make it right. I want to apologize to you both properly, and I want to give you this. I paused. I have arranged for a new card, a premier one, no limits, as a real apology, for you to use as you see fit. The shift in her tone was immediate. It was like a switch flipping from ice to honey. Oh, Beatrice. Mom. That's so generous. I mean, we were really hurt, but that's a wonderful gesture. Can you and Noah come by on Saturday? I asked. I'm also getting some of my estate paperwork in order, just some things to sign, to make sure you're both taken care of properly. I'd like you to be here. With witnesses. Witnesses? Her voice sharpened. Just a formality, I said quickly. Mr. Alder from the HOA, maybe the Gales, just to make it all official. I want to transfer some assets now. to show my good faith. Saturday, she said, her voice purring again. We will be there, and I accept your apology. I hung up. I felt like I needed to scrub my skin. The bait is in the water, I told Camille. I delivered the pristine new card in a small gift box. It looked expensive. It was tied to the real-time alert app on Camille's phone. We did not have to wait long. The first alert came 12 hours later. A charge attempt at Versace, com, declined. Amount $8,200. An hour later, the Gilded Spa. Charge attempt $3,500. Approved. The limit was holding. The next morning, a tasting menu reservation for 10 people at Le Cinq, a new French place. Charge attempt $6,000. Declined. My phone rang. It was Sienna. Beatrice, there's a problem with this new card, she said, her voice tight with irritation. It's faulty. It keeps getting declined. Oh dear, I said, feigning confusion. That can't be right. It's supposed to be a no-limit account. Let me call the bank right now and check on it. I hung up. I did not call the bank. I let her panic. While Sienna was frantically trying to extract cash from the bait card, Camille and I were finalizing the real case. Camille had filed a formal request with the HOA's bank, cross-referencing my statements. The bank records came back. There they were. Monthly debits from the Alder HOA reserve account to Utilities Consolidated, NWUS. Mr. Alder sat with us in Camille's office, his face grim. She was draining us, he said, his voice quiet. She was charging us for utilities that were already covered by the city, and then paying those same fees with your money. She created a perfect loop where she gets paid twice, and my residents, your neighbours, were covering the difference with their HOA dues. I looked at the statements from the HOA, seeing the names of the elderly residents who had been hit with special assessments to cover the shortfall. My data connected the dots. The merchant ID for NWUS, the one she used to bill the HOA, was registered to the same IP address as her freelance marketing website. It all led back to the same virtual office mail drop. She did not even bother to cover her tracks. She was that arrogant. Camille and I spent the next 2 days preparing the package. We printed every screenshot from the Skylarks chat. We printed the bank statements. We printed the HOA records. I sat at my computer and did what I do best. I made a flowchart. A simple, clear infographic that showed my money going from my account to her fake company to her own pocket, with a second line showing the HOA's money flowing to the same destination. The numbers were undeniable. We placed a small digital audio recorder in a pen cup on my living room coffee table. The trap was set. It was Friday night. The night before the signing. Noah and Sienna were due at my house at 11 in the morning. My phone pinged. It was an alert from Camille. You need to see this. She texted. I opened the banking app. 3 new charge attempts, all in the last hour. All declined. All from the bait card. The merchant, Northwest Utility Services, LLC. Amount $900. Amount $900. Amount $900. She was trying to wring the last drops from the card, using her own fake company to try and pull the remaining cash. She was desperate. She was greedy. And she was about to walk into my living room. I made the living room look soft, welcoming. I put out a vase of fresh freesias and used my good linen tablecloth. When the doorbell rang at 11 on Saturday morning, it looked less like an execution and more like a family brunch. They arrived together. Sienna was radiant, dressed in a sharp, cream-colored suit, smelling of expensive perfume. She was here to claim her prize. Noah looked tired, drawn, standing a half step behind his wife. They stepped inside and froze. It was not just me. Seated on my sofa were Dorothy Pike, holding her teacup, and Mr. and Mrs. Gale. In the wingback chair sat Mr. Alder, the HOA president, his face like granite. Standing by the fireplace, holding a leather briefcase, was Camille Rios. "What is this?" Sienna asked, her smile tightening, her eyes darting between the neighbors. "This is Camille Rios, my lawyer," I said smoothly. "And these are our witnesses. Please, sit down." Noah looked like he was going to be sick. Sienna, after a sharp intake of breath, composed herself. She saw the stack of official-looking documents on the coffee table, and her greed overruled her suspicion. She sat, arranging her skirt. She thought this was leverage, a public signing to guarantee her inheritance. "Beatrice," Camille began, her voice crisp and clear. "You wanted to open these proceedings?" "Yes," I said. I looked at Sienna, forcing warmth into my voice. "First, Sienna. Noah. I meant what I said. I want to apologize for my impulsive night at the restaurant. It was emotional. I want to move forward, which is why I've asked you all here to sign the papers for the transfer of assets, to make sure you're both taken care of." Sienna visibly relaxed. She gave Noah a triumphant little smile. She had won. Camille stepped forward. She took the small digital recorder from the pen cup and placed it squarely in the middle of the table. "For the official record of the signing," she announced. Sienna nodded, unfazed. "Beatrice, the first folder, please," Camille said. I reached for the first of 3 thick binders on the table. I did not open it toward Sienna. I opened it toward Mr. Alder and the Gales. "Folder 1, I said, my voice no longer soft, "is a complete accounting of the last 6 months from my personal accounts. It details $312,000 in non-emergency, unauthorized charges, culminating in the $47,000 charge at the Aurora." Sienna's smile vanished. "Beatrice, this is private family business. What are you doing?" "This," I said, sliding the infographic flowchart across the table, "is the money you stole from me." Noah flinched. "Mom, stole is—" "I am not finished," I said. I picked up the second folder. Folder 2. This is a record of transactions from the Alder Homeowners Association Reserve Fund. It details monthly payments to a company called Northwest Utility Services. I turned the page, revealing the spreadsheet I had found in her chat. It also lists the addresses of the residents being managed. Dorothy. "Is that your address?" Dorothy leaned forward, her voice shaking with rage. "Yes, it is. Mr. Henderson, the Gales, all here, all elderly, all living on fixed incomes." Mr. Alder brought his fist down on the coffee table, the cups rattling. "We have been pickpocketed," he roared, pointing at Sienna. "Our reserve funds, drained to pay for your parties. My residents were cutting back on medicine." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Sienna shot back, rising from her seat. "Northwest Utility Services is a legitimate household management company I hired. I provide a concierge service. It's perfectly legal." "A concierge service," Camille said, her voice cutting through the noise. She opened her own briefcase and produced a single, laminated sheet of paper. "Then you will not mind this. It is the official state registration for Northwest Utility Services, LLC. She slid it in front of Sienna. The address is a virtual mail drop, and the sole listed beneficiary, the only person authorized to draw funds, is you, Sienna Warren. I picked up the third folder. And folder 3, I said, is just for context. I turned it around. It was the printout of the Skylarks chat. I read Sienna's words into the silence of my living room. Newest client onboarded. The Alder block is now fully covered. Just let her pay. That is the role of their generation. It is our job to redistribute it. Sienna's face was a mask of pure, white hatred. Noah just stared at the table, his world visibly collapsing around him. There was no apology. There was no defense. There was only the sound of the digital recorder, humming quietly, capturing it all. Noah finally crumpled. He sank into the sofa cushion, burying his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I thought you were just being generous, he whispered, his voice muffled. I thought you knew. I thought you wanted to help us. I didn't know about the HOA. I didn't know about any of this. Sienna, she just handled all the finances. Handled? Sienna's voice, which had been silent, was suddenly sharp as broken glass. She shot up from her seat. She did not look at me. She looked at our audience. You want to talk about finances? She spat, her eyes flashing. This entire family runs on her financial manipulation. She holds this house over his head. That dream wedding she loves to talk about, that was just a down payment on his guilt. She buys his loyalty. She uses her money to control everyone around her. And you are all just sitting here letting her... She finally turned to me. And yes, the older generation should contribute. You sit on all this wealth, this property, doing nothing with it, while people like us, the ones actually living, have to fight for scraps. You call it theft, I call it a long overdue redistribution. That is a fascinating, if legally irrelevant, perspective, Camille said, her voice cutting cleanly through the air. She stood and picked up a single document. Let us talk about your contribution. This is a civil ultimatum. Sienna, you have 2 options. She held up one finger. Option 1. We immediately file a full civil lawsuit for the recovery of the $312,000 plus damages. Concurrently, we hand this entire file. She tapped the 3 thick binders on the table. To the Riverton District Attorney's Office, with a formal recommendation for criminal charges, wire fraud, merchant account fraud, and elder financial abuse. Given the evidence, I am confident they will pursue it. Sienna's face went chalk white. Noah looked up, his eyes wide with pure terror. Or, Camille continued, option 2, you sign a settlement agreement. Right now. That agreement includes the following. Non-negotiable terms. First, full restitution of the $312,000 to Beatrice. Second, full restitution to the Alder Homeowners Association, the initial amount being $50,000, pending a full audit. Third, a down payment of $50,000 will be made within 30 days. Fourth, a payment plan of $5,000 per month for the next 48 months. Fifth, you will both attend mandatory financial therapy. Sixth, you will terminate your tenancy at the Riverside condo, vacating the property within 30 days. And seventh, a binding restraining order will be filed, prohibiting you from ever accessing or inquiring about Beatrice's finances again. The room was utterly silent. Mr. Alder then stood up, his hands clasped behind his back. "And I must inform you," he said, his voice heavy, "that the Alder HOA will be filing its own suit separately. The funds you managed were for our community's survival. Because of your fees, Mrs. Gale and her husband," he gestured to the couple, who were visibly trembling, "had to cut back on their prescription medication last month to afford the special assessment we had to levy. This is not just numbers. This is not revenge. Sienna," I said, my voice steady, meeting her gaze. "I am not manipulating anyone. This is me, taking back my dignity. This is me, restoring the money you stole from my community, from my neighbors." All eyes turned to Noah. He was no longer looking at his wife. He was looking at me. For the first time in years, I saw my son, not her partner. He let out a long, shuddering breath. "We'll sign," he whispered. We sign the settlement. Option 2. He looked at Sienna. "Sienna, we have to." He turned back to me, his eyes full of a shame that was more painful to watch than any anger. "I will sell the car. We will move out. We will pay it back. Mom, I promise." "No," Sienna shrieked. It was a sound of pure desperation. She grabbed the pen from the settlement document and threw it across the room, where it clattered uselessly against the wall. "I will not be bullied. I will not be cornered by this cabal of old. Jealous has-beens, we are leaving, and we will sue you for harassment, for defamation." She grabbed her expensive purse, making for the door. "By all means," Camille said, not moving a muscle. "The discovery process will be illuminating. We will enjoy deposing the Skylarks. We will be very interested to subpoena the IP logs from your virtual office. We will especially enjoy matching the merchant account data from the HOA to the chat logs where you bragged about your Alder Block clients. The evidence is absolute. Sienna, your bluff is empty." Sienna froze, her hand on the doorknob. She was trapped. The glamour, the confidence, the entire narrative, she had built it all fractured and fell away in an instant. She turned back, her beautiful face distorted into a mask of such pure, ugly rage that it was hard to look at her. The mask was not just off. It was shattered. "You just do not get it. Do you?" She screamed, her voice cracking. "Any of you. You people just sit on your money and do nothing with it. I gave it purpose. I was just charging a management fee. I was charging a management fee for people who are too old and too stupid to know how to use their own money." Sienna's shriek, "too old and too stupid," hung in the air, a final, ugly stain. Before she could fill the silence with another defense, I reached for the television remote. "You mentioned management. Sienna," I said, my voice calm. "Let's look at your management structure." I clicked the power button. The large screen above my fireplace flickered to life. I opened the file, my infographic. The simple flowchart I had built in my study filled the screen. It was clean. It was simple. It was damning. 2 large boxes at the top. Beatrice's private account and Alder HOA reserve fund. Both had thick arrows pointing down to one central entity, Northwest Utility Services LLC. And from that LLC, one single bold arrow pointed to the final destination, Sienna Warren, personal savings account. Sienna stared at her name, her mouth open. The mask was not just off, it was vaporized. As she stood there, frozen, the doorbell rang. Mr. Alder, who had been expecting this, moved past her to open it. Two people stepped into the foyer. One was a woman in a severe, dark bank suit, carrying a legal briefcase. The other was a man who introduced himself as a lead investigator from the state's financial fraud unit. "Mr. Alder," the banker said. "Thank you for confirming the meeting. I have the notice you requested." She stepped into the living room, her eyes assessing Sienna, then me. "I am the representative for the HOA's commercial bank. As of 10:50 a.m. this morning, we have executed a temporary administrative freeze on all accounts registered to Northwest Utility Services LLC, pending a full investigation into merchant fraud." The investigator looked at Camille. "I understand you have the file." Camille, who had been silent, stepped forward. "Detective, I am Camille Rios, counsel for Mrs. Langford. We have just served Ms. Warren with notice of a full civil suit." She lifted the 3 thick binders from the coffee table, a heavy stack of paper. "This is our complete file. Bank statements, corporate filings, IP logs from the virtual office, and certified copies of the message chains. I believe your department will find it comprehensive." She handed the entire weight of the last 6 months to the investigator. The room was a vacuum. All the air, all the fight, had been sucked out of it. Noah, who had been staring at the flowchart on the screen as if it were a death sentence, finally moved. He stood up slowly, his body shaking with a deep, shuddering tremor. But his actions were clear. He reached into his pocket. He did not look at his wife. He did not look at me. He pulled out the single key to the Riverside condo. He walked forward, past Camille, past the banker, and placed the key gently on the linen tablecloth. "I am returning," he whispered, his voice cracking. "What isn't mine." That was the final break. Sienna let out a sound, a sharp, strangled noise of pure, animal defeat. She snatched her expensive purse from the sofa. She shoved past the investigator, past Mr. Alder, who did not move an inch to let her by. She yanked open my front door and stormed onto the porch. But the porch was not empty. Dorothy Pike was standing there, blocking the top step, and behind her, on the walkway, were Mr. Henderson and the Gales, the neighbours, the victims, the old and stupid people she had been managing. They did not speak. They did not yell. They just stood there, their faces etched with a profound, quiet disappointment, and watched her. Their silence was the real judgment. Sienna faltered, her momentum broken. She looked left, then right, trapped. She finally bolted, stumbling down the porch steps and running down the sidewalk. Back in the living room, the tension dissolved. Camille slid the settlement agreement now just between Noah and me across the table. I looked at my son. I picked up the pen and signed my name. Noah. His hand shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. Signed his. Dorothy and Mr. Gale co-signed as witnesses. "It is done," Camille said. "I am filing the financial restraining order against Sienna immediately." Mr. Alder clapped his hands together, not in applause, but in finality. "The HOA will convene an emergency meeting. We will begin refunding every resident from the reserve funds now that the bank has acted." Mrs. Gale let out a soft cry, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. Soon, they were all gone. The banker, the investigator, the neighbours. It was just Noah and me, standing in the quiet room. "Mum," he started, his eyes pleading. "Go, Noah," I said. It was not unkind. It was just finished. "You are always my son," I said, my voice steady. I will always love you. But the boundaries, from this day forward, are real. They are no longer negotiable. He nodded, a single, devastating sob escaping him, and walked out the door, leaving the key behind. I stood in that open doorway for a long time. The cool evening wind blew through the house, clearing out the heavy scent of Sienna's perfume. I looked at the key on the table, the weight of the shame, the self-doubt, the humiliation of the last year it just lifted. It evaporated on the breeze. I was no longer a resource. I was no longer a walking bank. I was Beatrice Langford, and I was the one who held the key to my own vault. Later that day, I found a small, plain wooden plaque in David's old workshop. I took a black marker, and in my clearest handwriting, I wrote 4 words on it. I hung it in the foyer, right by the entrance. Respect is due upon entry. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am so curious to know where you are all listening from today. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories and like this video. You can also show extra support by hitting that hype button, so this story can be heard by more people.